You people who are bitching at me from our community, go bitch to them, because we're a team, and I'm not not on this team just because of my heritage. I'm here because I'm a writer. If you've got a problem, we have to have a problem all together. And you know, it was a long, hard, grueling meeting. There were tears. People shouted. It was kind of uncomfortable. But at the end of that meeting, just about everybody at the table came over and hugged me and said, "Now I get it. I understand. I get it. Let's do better." Okay, let's do better. That's exactly it. Let's do better together. A couple days later, I went to a meeting of Wet'suwet'en, the Arts and Culture Circle in the city there, and I walked into the room and I went, "Oh, I'm comfortable." And I had a comfortable time, and I thought, oh, yeah, okay, I was only kidding, I'm not always uncomfortable. This is what it feels like to be comfortable, because it's all Aboriginal artists who understand what it is to be an Aboriginal artist working in the mainstream. We're all talking about how we work vis-a-vis the multicultural mainstream. We're all talking about that in different ways. So we're not going on about it because we don't have to talk about it. We're all just living it. We're talking about what we're doing. And we're just saying, hey, I'm doing this, you want to be in on that? I'm doing this, you want to be in on that? Yeah. And we kind of had a lot of fun. And I'll end this story about the challenges with one remarkable thing that happened there. The chairman, possibly because I like to yap, comes over to me at the beginning of the meeting. To my surprise, she gives me the tobacco and says, "Would you do the prayer?" And I'm like, okay, well, sure. Because if you're a performance poet, you have to look cool all the time. I'm like, yeah, I said, as if I knew. I said, "Oh, sure, okay, I'll do that." Okay. You know, and who can't pray, right? You think of something to pray about, and there's lots to pray about being in. For me, it always comes back to we're all in the big ceremony. Whenever it gets down, I'm like, look at, we made the team. We're alive, right? You may not make the basketball team. You may not be invited to sit in this chair or that chair or be with these people, but you made the team. You're alive as a human being on earth. That's got to count for something, because that's a pretty big deal. And so I always start with thanks for that. And at the end of that meeting, I was walking out with a person I know, but also with one of the people I didn't know. And we got to talking, and you know, she'd just come out from Ontario. I said, "Oh, Ontario, ha ha ha, we must be cousins." And she, "Where are you from?" And she says, "Well, I'm from Kittigansibi." You know, just, she looks at us. I'm going like this, and she goes, "It's right outside Sault Ste. Marie," because she thinks the look on my face is because I've never heard of this place. I'm like, really? Really? You're my cousin. That's my dad's reserve. She said, "Yeah, my grandpa was Dan Pine." I'm like, "No." And I started crying, and I just give her a hug. I said, "Oh my God, your grandpa saved my dad's life. I owe you my life, basically." Because he was the guy, he was the chief at that time, and he ran these camps, these winter camps. And my dad, when he was 12, left with his dog and went into the bush to find Dan Pine's camp. And that saved his life from what was going on in his life at that time. And he never talked too much about it other than to say that was the thing. And that taught him what he had to do in life. And he was given his instructions at that time about where to go and what to do. And I have been spending all spring thinking about that, going, how will I ever get in touch? I don't know his family. I'm not from there, you know, I didn't. Gee, I'm kind of lazy. I don't want to have to go all the way over there and try and say, can I find someone who knows this story? And poof, how lucky am I? Here comes my cousin. She happened to move to town, and she said, yeah, I'm his granddaughter. I'm like, oh my God, well, I got some questions for you. And the challenge is to accept that too, to accept that and just go, okay, that's really the way it works. There's a time for healing, and when that time is coming to you, don't get scared of it, don't back away from it. Jump up and see what you can do with that. There, long answer, eh?
Well, we've been talking throughout the week that each person is a natural born storyteller. And I have to say, you certainly fit the bill, Ms. Sewell. It's amazing to listen to what you're sharing with us spontaneously. None of this is scripted. None of this has been programmed. None of it has been scheduled. Thank you very much for sharing that. And you made a comment that you were happy that we began with this poem. I should let you know that this poem proved so evocative for every single member of the Universal Cree philosophers. It was obvious to begin there because everybody related to this poem. So I'll share with you a little more and open it up again for questions. Here's another Universal Cree philosopher writing in dialogue with worm medicine. One word, purpose. One sentence, the earthworm. So tiny, unnoticed, yet so essential to the life cycle. It serves a purpose. How much more so for me and the purpose that I serve. One paragraph. I love the poem about the earthworm. It reminds me about my childhood, my life, and the shit I've been through, and that despite the tough times, they served a purpose. Those difficult times that I survived and disposed of made me, shaped me, molded me into the person I am today. I've gleaned the good, my good. Hi, hi, thank you in Cree. Stream of consciousness. An earthworm feeds, lives in dirt and rotting things, yet they clean the soil for us, for our gardens, and the beautiful grass, greens and flowers grow because of it. How much more so the struggles and obstacles that we face. We're not worms. We're so much more complex as a human race. And the struggles we face make beautiful outcomes and people and experiences based on our reaction to those events. Just as a small earthworm serves a purpose, how much more so do you, I, we, and our experiences. They named this the earthworm because it's perfect in the description of the earthworm or character alone. So simple, yet serves such a great purpose to our beautiful earth. My working definition of shit, my definition of shit isn't so much crap or feces as it is about abuse and suffering. You can even call it trials and tribulation, but it entails going through a process with great difficulties. Going through it's tough, but it happens. Questions. The only wrong question is the unasked question, and time is going fast now. Who would like to ask a question? Yes. Buffalo Thunder.
How long did it take you to do your book there that's on the floor? The compilations you did, how long did it take?
That's a great question.
I don't know the answer to that question, actually, because it depends on how you measure it. Because it's my first book. You could say I've been writing it up until I started putting it on paper. It's like, I like looking at music documentaries. And you know, and then it's always like in the music industry, like your first album is great, and then there's the sophomore album. That's the hard one, right? The follow-up, because you know, if you've got a contract, you had like 10 years to write your first set, and then you got to turn out a second set in like a year or something. So I don't know how long it took me to write this. When I decided to put it together as a book, took it as a challenge with a friend of mine one summer to sit down over the course of 2 months and just root through my papers and write new stuff and come up with a book's worth of stuff over the course of a summer. So I did. I got up every morning at 5 o'clock and sat at my little desk and just ruffled through stuff until I was too hungry to forget about breakfast, and that was kind of how I did it. It was because it was the only quiet time because my kid was only little, and so I'd get up at that time. And yeah, so about 2 months to put it together, but a long time before that to start drawing it together. Any other questions?
Are you from BC? You're from BC? Where are you from, Ontario?
Yep. Well, here, I'll tell you where from. Short answer, long answer. I was born in Fredericton, in Mi'kmaq in Fredericton, New Brunswick. And I was raised in northern Alberta, up in the Peace Country. But my dad is from Kitigan-Zibi, from Garden River in Ontario. And my mom's from, from up north, Peace Country, but she is from the half of her family that was born here, and the half of them were born in eastern Poland. And then they came over. When they were under martial law, they came to get away from all of that. And because they were told, hey, there's free land. And as my grandpa always said, well, they told us, hey, there's free land out here, but they didn't tell us there were people living there. And by the time he figured that out, that they hadn't been sold a bill of goods, really, he couldn't go back. He had like 5, 6 kids by then, and they didn't come because they were rich and doing well. And he's like, okay, I guess we just make the best of it. Figure it all out, and you know, in the meanwhile, he's teaching himself to read English by working with the newspapers. And my mom was, when she got old enough, she was the one who taught him, who would read stuff to him, and he would figure out what the heck was going on, because that's how he learned to read back home, was in his basement. They kept a tutor for 3 winters. And he learned from that. And I always wondered about that story. I thought, well, there's some weird times back there, but that's a long answer to your story. I'm mostly from Alberta, but I was born out in the east. And not because I am Mi'kmaq by law as well, but that's not why I was born there. I was born there because my dad was in the services, and he was stationed at Ormocto. So that's why I ended up born in my family's traditional territory, because my dad was serving in the army. I was going to give it back to him. Who am I going to give this to?
Questions? Yes, Winterhawk.
Okay, I have a couple questions. Where does creativity come from with you? How does it spark with you? Do you have a muse? Do you talk to the muse? And how did you get published?
Good question.
Oh, those are great questions. So where does creativity come from? I don't know. I just think it is. There's a comedic writer who is an English writer, Terry Pratchett. He writes they're fantasy novels, but they're not like really sci-fi-ish. They're really silly and satirical novels, and a friend of mine got me into his writing. But he has this thing where he talks about creativity as, in his worldview, there's ideas are flying around all the time like radio waves. And when I read that, I thought, oh, that's it. And he describes these little characters bumbling along, and you know, the idea will ping into their head. And where the stories become troublesome was when someone catches an idea and you know, the narrative versus going, oh, you're going to have trouble here because look at the idiot that caught this idea, right? Because ideas don't care who catches them. And I thought, that's about the way it is. In my reality, it's like a constant radio signal that if you want, and you tune yourself in, and there it is. For me, that's the way it is. It's always there. I'm sort of riding in it, like the ocean or something too. You could put it that way. Do I have a moose? I have a moose. I have the moose of inspiration. You know, they have those muses and that, but it's something back in my first year art course when I was in love with that guy, the other reason I stayed was because my prof was really cool. She was this cool old lady. She said, here's the thing. If you're nearsighted, count your blessings. Take your glasses off when you make love and everyone looks beautiful. She was like this little crabbed up 7-year-old woman. I'm like, oh my God. But it's life wisdom, right? But she was so brilliant. And she would tease people. She'd walk around and we were trying to draw our stupid color blocks and goes, are you waiting for the moose of inspiration? And I stole that from her. I thought, yeah, because that's what it's like. I have this moose. I have an imaginary moose that sits on my shoulder and comments on what I'm doing, you know? Because I think that's like a moose. Who would have a moose on their shoulder? Why not? I try to imagine that moose, that creature, because they're so unlikely. You know, in so many ways, like I look for unlikely signs like that. And one time I was driving down the highway on the Red Arrow going to a theater conference with a professor I never had, who nonetheless, because this is the kind of guy he was, he noticed me. And he just sort of always kept an eye on me. And I always felt kind of safe. You know, just if he'd pass through the hall, he's just one of those guys that created that feeling of safety. And I just thought, oh, you know, that's me imagining that. But years later, we're colleagues and we're going down the road and he says, oh, no, I remember you. You know, I remember thinking, oh, you're going to do okay. And I thought, oh, it wasn't just me. He really was keeping an eye on me. And we're talking about life and theater and writing and stuff. And we're going down the road just out here, like, and there's nothing. It's open, it's fields. And there's a little dugout in the middle of this big field of canola, and poof, up comes a moose. And Jim goes, oh my God, look at that, it's a moose. And it jumps out and it looks at him and it comes across and it just about jumps out the highway and it turns around and goes. And we laughed for hours, but we still, anytime I see him, I said, remember the moose? And for me, that's what I think of. I think of moments that sort of pop up out of a slough. You know, there's a slough again, a little moose popping out of the slough. And to me, it's anything like that that kind of catches my attention. How I got published was, I just put my book out there. I put it together. I put it together as a manuscript, and I looked around for publishers that were taking poetry. And I sent it to a couple of places. Sight unseen, not with any hope one way or the other, just sent it to them thinking, well, maybe they'll publish it, maybe they won't. And then it's really who you know and the work that you do. It's other connections that you make, because I was on a jury, because I've been doing all this work in theater, I was on a jury for an arts thing, and the publisher who published my book was on that jury. And we had such a good time those 2 days just discussing art and stuff and working together on sorting out other people's grants that I felt like I knew her well enough at the end of that time to go, hey, Rose, can I send you a book? Hey, can I send you a book to look at? And she's like, yeah, you can send me a book. And I did. And then I forgot. Because I had a little, ankle-biting baby at that time. And you know how you get distracted. So actually about early May of the next year, I was walking around thinking, uh-oh, did I send it? Or did I just think I sent it? Because I could remember putting it in the envelope, but I couldn't remember dropping it off at the post office. I'm like, oh, damn, I hope I sent that. And I'm walking home, literally the day I'm walking home going, I'm going to have to phone her and go, Rose, did I send you something? Because otherwise it's just too embarrassing. You know, you got to ask. And there was a letter from her saying they'd accepted the book. I'm like, oh, okay. I'm saved from the embarrassment of asking if I actually sent it. Thank God. Yeah, and they're the best publishers. You could ask for excellent people. Frontenac House, it's a husband and wife team. And they just keep this little publishing company and publish poetry, art books, a little bit of history stuff now. And I've talked to a lot of writers. It's kind of a crapshoot who you get as a publisher, and I feel like I really lucked out. But partly that's because I think because the old moose was with me there and letting me just not think about her as, when we were working on that jury, I wasn't thinking to myself, I'm going to score this publisher. I was just thinking, well, here's an interesting person, right? And we were focused on the work, and we just found we were kind of a lot alike in our thinking, or enough alike that I felt like I could send her that. So I think that might be something useful for business too, is you always, you're not always hustling. It's not like you're always on the make, like, what can I get from you? But you're always open to seeing that people turn up. People turn up who are good connections, who you have something to offer them, they have something to offer you. And I hope that is kind of a useful kind of answer to it. And I just have to say one other thing. Last night I was talking to a poet friend of mine after class. I work with his wife, she's my boss, and so we're finishing this class, we're walking out, he's picking her up, and I'm telling them what I'm going to do. And Randy goes, well, that's remarkable. You mean to say business students are studying poetry? We would never do that. they're way more open-minded than poets. And we stood there, looked at each other and went, well, that kind of sucks. Because people think of ourselves, when you're a poet, you think, I'm so creative, I'm so open-minded, I am so imaginative. But we're standing and looking at each other. Can you imagine a group of poets studying business for a week? Man, you couldn't tie us into the chairs. And we're both kind of walking away going, we should do that. We gotta do that. It's gonna be tough, but we should do it.
Thank you, that was good. Well, believe it or not, the earthworm proved very fertile because there's more and more to share with you. Here's another Universal Cree philosopher on worm medicine, without knowing it's worm medicine. One word, universe. One sentence. In the universe, everything has meaning. Everything has purpose. One paragraph. The tiny worm is mighty in his tiny work. His job is small, and his contribution is immense. Stream of consciousness. I personally have respect for worms. I'm gardening right now and broke ground in six places. Each time I found a worm in the soil, I carefully took it out and deposited it in my new garden bed. I saved my worms from bait last year's fishing and gave them a new home in my garden beds. I understand their contribution to the health of my soil and plants. This understanding is part of my culture and part of the science I understand. I, however, slightly dislike religious scripture and dogma, so the quote at the end to me was unnecessary. All good teachings and philosophy is good, even that of humble worms. Worms are cool. Yay, worms! Everything deserves its place, even tears and pain. They make us who we are and are a gift. Gifts are cool. Yay, gifts! Their tweet, worms eat shit and fart out happy little flowers. Such is the universe. I name this the gospel of the worm and other shit. Why? It is a philosophy that is universal as demonstrated by the lowly worm and the and other shit part just sounds cool.
Oh, okay, can I respond?
Yeah,
I just have to say, I'm so glad somebody brought up that bit about the quote at the end, because I thought to myself as I'm reading that, I wonder what that, I wonder about that, because when people are writing stuff as Aboriginal people and we feel like we have to reference something that people are going to get, I often wonder about that. I think, how much more can we do if we just say, you figure out the references. That's not my job. And I wonder if, as I'm reading, I'm thinking, I wonder if they'll take that way, and I have to tell you why that quote is in there. And it's for two reasons, and one of them is because Francis of Assisi was from Italy, and so is my friend Maria. She's of Italian extraction, and so in a way it's something I knew would kind of resonate with her, and in another way, because I was raised semi-Catholic, but only semi, and I love spiritual life, but I don't practice formal religions, and I think one of the challenges of my life is to take what's good out of the fact that the Catholic Church is such an important presence in our communities today, right? And is so influential. Even when you don't see it there, it's influencing what people are saying and doing. That's just the way it is. And there's something about that I had to acknowledge. And the one thing I always liked was there's this song that there's a little hymn, Make Me a Channel of Your Peace, the Prayer of St. Francis. And when I was a kid, I thought, that's the coolest song. I love the melody. I love the words. I didn't even know who it was, you know. And then when I found out later who Francis of Assisi was, of the saints, that's pretty, you know, that's a pretty good guy. He decided he would hang out with animals, you know, and say, look at the soul of animals is important too. And so for his time and his place, and for his influence in the church that's so influential in our world now, I think that's not bad. And I feel kind of like I'm on trend because the Pope picked his name too, right? The first Francis. Yeah, and you know, so maybe it was like a prophecy. No, not even. Not even, but maybe he was thinking like that too, right? Thinking that, you know, if you think about the humble things, maybe it'll help you when you're trying to do big things. And maybe that's what that quote's for. But I don't even know what it's there for, really, except that maybe we're, you know, as far as you might go in your work, the little things will come with you, and maybe it's for that. I don't know. Maybe it's for that for me. As far as I go, wherever that is, the little things are always going to be there.
Well, that same Universal Creed philosopher also shared their working definition of shit. Here it is. Shit is a word that can mean many things, both negative and positive. For example, those nachos were the shit. Positive meaning, those nachos were awesome. Your breath smells like shit. Negative meaning, your breath smells like feces. Don't give me that shit. Negative meaning, that is unacceptable. Overall, it's a very versatile word. So, that word is the shit.
So that was my stuff there. And I just want to thank you for allowing us to use your poetry and kind of, you know, pick it apart and you know, dissect it, and, you know, because it really, throughout the course of the seminar, it kind of helped a lot of people to express their creativity, right? So I just wanted you to know that you know, I'm sure everybody here, you know, has a gratitude for that. I had a question regarding, I guess, how, or if anybody ever gets really agitated or really uncomfortable with your poetry, right? Because I know it has a lot of reference to spirituality, and there's reference to politics, and there's, you know, or do people ever just get like really confused and be like, what the hell is she talking about? Right?
Oh, good question.
I try to work really hard to make sure that one doesn't happen. More so that's when I'm talking personally to them. Or when I'm writing them a 6-point email, like, what the hell are you talking about? Let me put it to you another way. This sucks. People do get uncomfortable. I've not had people get overtly uncomfortable with the political stuff. I've had them, cause I you know, there's a lot more hard-hitting poets out there than me. I'm a pretty soft-hitting poet, really. And my old friend Thomas, who's a fiction writer, he said, you know, your work's about like being stabbed to death with a butter knife. And it's like a long, slow cut with a butter knife. I'm like, oh, thank you. And he meant that in a good way, right? So it tends to, people, you know, if you're cutting them with a butter knife, it takes them a while to come back at you. Right? It's not the same as, you know, people who go in there and just bang. And I admire the people who do that too, but the spiritual thing, definitely people get uncomfortable with that. I was kind of feeling all proud and kind of be puffed. That's one of my favorite words, be puffed. It's like it makes me feel like a rice or something. I'm be puffed. Because we ate a lot of wheat and puff rice when I was a kid, you know. That's my word, I'm be puffed. I was a bit be puffed thinking about this review I got for this book, wherever it went to, when it came out. I got reviewed by the Globe and Mail, which apparently is a big deal, right? Because it's the Globe and Mail. And the guy was kind of too cool for school. You know, he was just like, I'm such an edgy, cool writer, and I have to admit, spiritual stuff makes me queasy, and there's such an overtly prayerful tone here that I can't quite be comfortable with it. And then he says, it's sort of that rock, trees, clay imagery that reminds you of Maya Angelou. And I'm like, Maya Angelou. Oh my God, he compares me to Maya Angelou. And so I tweeted that when she died. I'm like, because she has such an influence. You talk about influences, you read her work, man, that woman was just